A little bit of a content warning for this talk. We won't be showing anything graphic, any photos like that. We will be discussing the Refugee Aid Movement, which of course includes environments like camps, different routes that people take to travel, things like that. There will be some photos of the camps, warehouses, different things. But I just want to let everyone know what you're in store for. There's nothing that's too bad or shocking there. Cool. So, a little bit of context before we dive into the tech side of things. The Refugee Aid Movement is the largest grassroots movement in the world. It's Europe-wide. It was kind of kicked off 2015, 2016, when a lot of folks from Syria were coming over here through Turkey. Now there's a lot of people as well coming, everywhere. Lots of people from Libya and other African nations, Afghanistan, of course, Iraq, Iran. It's just a really kind of massive movement of people coming to Europe, and there's been an amazing response from all of the European aid workers who decided to go out and change their careers or take a bit of time off and volunteer. It looks like a distributed autonomous network, so lots of independent groups, lots of small-scale projects that all kind of work together and collaborate in order to provide basic needs and services and care. So, the goal of the aid movement is to fill the gaps. We joke that we shouldn't have to do this job. It's really a failing on the government's part, but it needs to be done, and so we're here to do it. It's definitely harm reduction work. We can't stop wars on our own. We can't, prevent environmental catastrophes as aid workers. What we can do is make sure that people have housing, they have food, they have the opportunity to have an education, and that they have somewhere safe to call home. So we definitely try to abide by this idea of solidarity, not charity. We're working together for a better world for everybody, ourselves included, you included, not just saying we have some extra to give. And what I love about the aid movement is super diverse, and it's led by women. So on screen you have Rudina, the founder of Thaki, and we'll talk about her organization later on in the talk. You have our own director in the middle, Sarah Lonegard, and you have Stephanie, who is the donations coordinator at Movement on the Ground, which is a very great NGO doing field work there. I guess the last point I want to make, since we're in Sweden and Greta Thunberg is going around the world raising awareness about the environment, is that this movement is very tied to environmentalism. We try to be very conscious of that while we are doing the work that we do, but also a lot of the conflicts that we help people who are leaving those conflicts and coming here from are caused by environmental disasters. In Syria, the kind of desertification happened, crops failed, people moved to the cities, and that's what sparked the civil war there. So it's something that's very related to the work we do, and I try to keep that in mind. By the numbers, we estimate there are just about 600 grassroots refugee aid groups in Europe, with tens of thousands, I'd say maybe about 10,000 volunteers each year supporting them. There are hundreds of thousands of new asylum seekers coming to Europe every year. Most recently, there's been a big influx from Turkey, where 10,000 people in the past month have shown up on the Aegean Islands due to various geopolitical events. And in Europe, of course, you host millions of people who are seeking refuge, which is a really beautiful thing, and I think that we should all be proud of that. On our note, we deal a lot with the aid supply chain. So individuals collect, send, and distribute over 40 million euros worth of aid. And remember, this is a volunteer-based movement. This is college kids working out of a garage, retirees, going around collecting these things. So I think that's a really impressive thing for everyday people to be able to do that. Globally, there are 23 million refugees right now. And when I say refugee, I'm talking about someone who has applied for and been granted asylum status. There are all sorts of kind of other technical terms. You have asylum seekers while they're going through that process, but it's not just anybody who is leaving their country for a new country. It's different than immigration, things like that. There are also 70 million, including refugees, 70 million displaced people. So a lot of people end up internally displaced in their own country. They might have to leave where they're from due to a natural disaster or war, but maybe not go to a different country entirely in order to find refuge. And one of the big things that was really shocking to me was the UN report that came out earlier this year. Given where we're headed with climate change, they estimate there could be up to 1 billion displaced people in the world by 2050. So this movement got started in 2015. It will last forever, and I'm glad to be building the infrastructure and working with other people who are now so that we can continue to address these problems as they grow. So what do these groups do? Well, you can help at home. We already talked about donation collection and just going out to your local community saying, hey, do you have extra shirts, sleeping bags, winter coats? There's, of course, fundraising, which is super important. A lot of awareness and advocacy work can be done right from your living room, either online or on the phone, calling a representative, writing a letter. A bit more directly, you have housing and education for folks who have been resettled in your hometown, and integration work where you are able to go around and introduce people to your own culture and learn about theirs in return. So this is an example of People in Motion who participated in a shipment that we organized to Calais, France. You can see it's a small group of folks. They got about half a truck's worth of aid, but that's really going to make a difference when it gets to the field. I mean, that includes a bunch of tents and sleeping bags and winter clothes, which will essentially make up someone's home in Calais. So I think that it's important. You don't have to be this really big thing. You don't have to make it a dedicated career, all of that. Doing little things like this really do make an impact over time. So in the field, we look at groups that do search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean, aid distribution. So when you send a shipment, you got to hand it out, and there are different ways to do that. Food distribution. I know cooking projects that serve 1,000 meals 3 times a day, 365 days of the year. You also have housing and showers, medical clinics, activities such as sports, educational projects and language learning, community centers, and of course legal support. So you can imagine that with all of these services, it can be really complex to coordinate them, and that they all rely on technology to do the work that they do in very varied and different ways. I'd like to just share some photos. We're lucky enough to take a trip to Greece this summer to visit some of these groups working on the ground. And these are photos from our visit with STEPS, which is a street outreach team in Athens. And it really exemplifies the type of work that goes on. They show up to this public park and create basically a community out of nothing a couple times a week, and invite other aid groups to join them to provide essential services to people living on the streets. So they start off by getting the food cooking right there in front of everybody. It's not prepackaged or anything. It really does help to create this community vibe. You can see while people are waiting, they have tea, they have snacks. That's a little bit of the soap. We did a soap shipment to Greece, so they're handing it out to people there. There's a group called Ithaca Laundry Support that converted a whole van into a mobile laundry unit, right? We're used to writing unit tests and, deploying to a web server, but tech is tech. It's big, it's broad. This is hardware hacking, so to speak. And it's really cool. They hook it up to the local water supply, they run a generator, and in that 4-hour time span, they can wash and dry clothes for 20, 30, 40 people. They also do mobile showers, which is great if you're on the streets. It might be the only opportunity to take a shower that week. You have a barber. This is a local guy who shows up and just cuts hair, right? Like really simple things like that. And of course, medical teams. So this is the medical Volunteers International group that sends a few of their clinicians down to do basic things, diabetes testing, just stuff that you can do in the field, not in a doctor's office or medical clinic. And at the end of the day, everyone sits down and has a wonderful meal together. So when we talk about refugee aid work, that is the type of community and the type of projects that we are discussing. It's just a little street shot of everyone together. So finally, you have groups that are in between. Sorry, in between. They're not working at home. They're not necessarily on the front lines on the grounds. It's groups like ours. You also have central warehouses, which collect lots of donations in country and then will distribute them over time to camps and groups in the region. Volunteer placement organizations. You have groups doing monitoring and reporting, for example, for illegal pushbacks, and organizing. So we kind of get into the organizing side and the tech side at Distributed. That's a shipment we organized, and that's a central warehouse that received part of that shipment. Just stacks and stacks of pallets. It's quite fun and cool as someone who spent a lot of time in the office, and then you go into this whole other world. So there are lots of challenges, of course, when you're trying to figure out how to support these groups. They don't have money, they don't have time, there's never enough people, there's no power in many cases, and there's certainly no Wi-Fi or signal. So it's like you gotta know your users, right? You gotta get out there and stay as close to them as possible. And that's why I wanted to lead with the challenges that they face. So no money, more problems. The reality is that if you give me $20, I have an impossible choice to make. I can buy a tent for someone sleeping outside on the Greek islands, or I could pay for a software subscription. The other thing that works against this is people don't donate to operations. They donate to help those, the beneficiaries. So it's really hard to even get gas for that van that does the mobile laundry support, or to buy food, right? That may be good, but you still need all the cooking oils, the kitchen supplies, maybe rent for volunteers who are out there for months at a time. So that's something that every project involved in this field has to consider. You can't just sell a software subscription, charge money. You have to find creative ways of funding your tech project. There's also very little time, which creates problems. So all the time people spend doing field work is spent directly helping newcomers, whether it's building tents on the Greek islands, or cooking, or going on distributions. And folks doing work back home, they have jobs, they have families, they do as much as they can, but there is also normal life to live. So we try to really make it easy to use, simple software that helps them get the job done and move on. It's not something where we're trying to capture their attention and see how long they stay on the app. The less time they spend using our software, the better, as long as they're able to accomplish what they need to do. More government means more problems, so a little bit of an inverse there. The European governments really need aid workers, especially in countries like Serbia, Bosnia, Greece, Italy, but they don't like us very much. So there's lots of red tape and bureaucracy, which can be very difficult to navigate. The common joke is, well, I'll stay in this country until they deport me, because there's sometimes no way to get a volunteer visa, go the legal route, and they do that very intentionally. There's also, unfortunately, plenty of cases of police brutality, of course, against newcomers, but also aid workers. So I don't want to dive into that too much right now, but I am able to share some stories if you'd like to talk more about some of the scarier government problems after this talk. So, extreme environments, kind of wrapping up this section. Maybe not that extreme, not quite. But we do, there is tech out there that helps search and rescue NGO ships in the Mediterranean, middle of the ocean, no cell towers around. This is the Moria refugee camp on the Greek island of Lesbos. It is not in town. It's 6 kilometers from town, and there's very little infrastructure out there. It's built on in a former prison. So you can see just barbed wire and everything around there. That's what it looks like on the ground. So when we and other technology groups are considering building software for the people that work in those environments, as you can see, there's no power outlets. There's very little cell service, and it's spotty at best. The only Wi-Fi is at the coordinator's, kind of hut, and you'll be out all day doing a distribution. So you have to pay a lot of attention to, things. Can it work offline, or can it work intermittently offline? Will it drain the phone's battery? It doesn't help if you're trying to plan a distribution and count how much stuff people need, and then your phone dies halfway through. So this is a bit fun. When I was on Lesbos last summer, I helped set up the Wi-Fi in part of the camp. And the left circle there is the coordinator's hut. The right circle is one of 3 Wi-Fi repeaters that go around this section of the camp, which includes that whole hillside that you see. And the Wi-Fi is beamed off of a water tower from town 6 kilometers away. There's like a satellite dish connected, to DSL or something in town. Beam that, bounce it off the water tower, which has another dish, to that coordinator's hut, and then it's repeated throughout that section of the camp. So it means that we have some very interesting challenges to deal with, and things like performance really matter. This is a warehouse. It's the old Pampariki warehouse in Athens. It's pretty cool. It's actually the 2003 Olympic basketball stadium, and the government gave them permission for a number of years to store aid all around the ring, like where the concessions and stuff were. So there's, as you can imagine, a bit better cell signal, but no Wi-Fi and few charging stations. This is another warehouse in Thessaloniki, and that is the office section in the back with Wi-Fi, but the rest of the warehouse doesn't have any repeaters or anything. So if you're on the far end, you can't connect. It's a giant metal warehouse. Think big Faraday cage. Walking around with your phone, maybe you'll get some signal, maybe you won't. Cool. And that is the Serbian-Hungarian border. I was just up there like a week ago, where I had a training with someone from the Border Violence Monitoring Network, and they go out and take reports from the field about police activities along the border. So they're out there all day. They're not, in cities or anything. They don't have access to power. They don't have access to Wi-Fi. All of this is just to try to help set the scene, but really emphasize that when we're building tech for the aid movement, we can't make a lot of assumptions that I think we usually take for granted in this community. So let's actually talk about some of the tech that's being used in the field today. This is a bit boring. It's like a lot of the commercial stuff. Think of grassroots NGOs as your typical small business. You have Google Drive or Microsoft Office, lots of spreadsheets, pen and paper is also a good option. On the communication side, Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp are the biggest tools. Some groups are starting to maybe switch to Signal, at least for coordinators, which is good. But everyone's on WhatsApp and Facebook, so that's what they use. Also do some Google Hangouts and Skype. And again, going back to that low tech but still tech solution is radios. If you're walking around a camp, that is probably your best bet if you need to get in contact with somebody. Fundraising, you have lots of options. There's PayPal, GoFundMe, Just Giving, Patreon, bank transfers, but cash is great. Not quite tech, but still a wonderful invention that is, I think, being phased out in Sweden right now. I don't know if anyone's tried to pay with cash recently. They did not let me on the bus, but yeah, and then you have volunteers, lots of spreadsheets, Salesforce, and the local watering hole, right? Having conversations with people, telling them about what you do, seeing if they're interested, not a bad place to do it. So devices include mostly laptops and phones. You usually don't have desktops, and tablets are less common. A whole bunch of different operating systems and browsers. So it's something that just whatever you bring to the table is what you get, and we have to make sure that the technology works with all of it. This is my friend's laptop. It does not have a battery. She has to leave it plugged in, and if anybody, like her cat, trips over the cord, it immediately loses all progress. So again, one of those other challenges where you wouldn't think that this is the case, it is. Will your app get corrupted if it suddenly has a hard shut-off like that, right? Or does it have some redundancy built into it? This is my friend's phone. He can't use about half his screen. I can only send him voice notes on WhatsApp. He could go buy a new phone, but that would be about the equivalent to 1 month's rent that he pays. So again, I'm not sure if there's a solution for this one. Maybe if there's a way to resize your app so it's only half the screen. But that's the reality that we deal with every day. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about tech, kind of the less standard stuff, the more boutique solutions. So by us, for us. We'll be reviewing technology built by refugee aid, nonprofits, and NGOs for other aid groups in the movement. So Distribute Aid, this is what I do. It's an online platform that incorporates a lot of tools. Right now we're focused on the supply chain, and really it's a way to surface structured info rather than have generic tools like Facebook or ephemeral tools like WhatsApp messages or emails. Just get it up there in a structured format so that other people in the community can see it. We're focused on the refugee aid movement in Europe right now, but I'm excited that there's lots of applications it could be applied to. And with all of these tools, I've included a link to them. So if you're interested, you can check out the slides and find out more about them after the talk. So we have the AGPL license, free as in freedom. We are also free as in beer. Aid group can't pay for our software? No problem, they don't have to. We have an all-volunteer remote-first team, and there's 3 of us that are out in Serbia right now. And we've had our supply chain tools in kind of an extended beta for 6 months, but during that time, we've helped aid groups ship 750,000 euros worth of aid, which I am thrilled about. So we use Nginx, Elixir, and Phonics, jQuery, Webpack, pretty low tech on the front end. I have to say I've loved Elixir on the back end, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible for people to get involved. And this is what our software looks like. Some basic profiles, this is a list of shipments that people are organizing through our software, and then you can see on the shipment details page, what's the route, where is it going, what's the overview. As you can see, it doesn't take a really big effort. I mean, it's been a large effort for us, but it's not like we've had 10 full-time engineers on this. It's not like we have a really complex software product. Keep it simple, but if you just go out and do it, you can have a huge impact in the world. I'd like to talk about Boxwise for a minute. So they're a really cool group. They let you print like almost shipping labels and stick them on boxes. We get the aid to the warehouse. They manage the aid within the warehouse and through the distribution, especially through a free shop model. So some inventory management. They have a point of sale system which supports free shops. It's not actual money, but people get points that they can spend in order to give them more choice. And they do needs forecasting. It's great. We love them. We collaborate with them. And they are also open source, Apache v2. There's a small monthly fee. We're trying to go broad. They're trying to go deep and really make that warehouse operation as smooth as possible. This is how they keep themselves sustainable, just to cover the server costs and things. So they have an all-volunteer team, have been in production for about 2 years, and this is a really interesting trade-off. They wrote the original app in PHP and then started to rewrite it in React with Firebase as a backend, but after a few months of effort decided that spending all that time on the rewrite was not worth it and went back to supporting the original PHP app. That's the difference. They wanted to have an impact sooner rather than later, and even though it's not maybe as kind of new of a tech stack, it works for them. So that's an example of how you can see all the labels on the boxes, and you'd scan it, bring it over to the free shop, and then people would be able to find items that they want. Needs list is cool. This gets into consumers supporting aid groups. It's an online registry for humanitarian aid. Groups can put up what they want, where, how much money they need, or items that you can buy on their behalf, and then everybody can go on there and make a donation or buy a pair of socks or a tent or something like that. So really focused on the fundraising side. They're closed source and they're a public benefit corp. So not quite a nonprofit, but they are kind of using this new thing in the US in order to say that we're not all about making money for ourselves. Yeah. I think they have an in-person, remote, and paid team. They've been in production for about 3 years now. So you can see this is their software list of different needs or donation requests. You can drill down and find out more about the group. They use vetted groups on their site. And they've also had a huge impact. They've seen $1 million invested in local communities all over the world. They work with 300 trusted charities, and they've helped to meet 100,000 needs that aid groups have put up on their site. So Indigo Volunteers is another group. They're focused on the right. It says vet. Oh, right. Okay, I see now. They vet aid groups and then match volunteers to them. So they find out about each aid group, what's needed, what type of skills, what type of projects you're running, and then go ahead and match volunteers to that aid group with those requisite skills or people who are interested in that sort of work. They're no source. They use Salesforce, which I think is a great example. You don't need to be a programmer to use technology to help others. And as programmers, can we build tools that allow other people to go in and build out workflows or different processes that we didn't expect, right? They are free as in beer, a nonprofit, and have an in-person and remote volunteer team. They've been active since 2012. So that's a shot of their website right there. Volunteer for Refugees, I think, is the last group I'll talk about as projects built by aid workers for aid workers. It's an open platform. They also get into volunteer matching, especially in Greece, and have a lot of materials on there to educate volunteers about what it's like going to Greece and doing work. So they're closed source, I believe. It's kind of an individual project. This guy just saw a problem, wanted to solve it, and made a website to do so. But they are free, and they've been in production since 2016. And I apologize to any designers in the room. Some people love this site, others hate it. It really depends on who you ask. So you can see there's a list of volunteers there, and you can drill down and find out more about the group and the position. Cool. So there's lots of solutions out there. I don't know them all. And there's also lots of in-house solutions. You might have an aid group that has a volunteer who helps build their website or builds an internal tool that they use that's not really part of the larger community. Sometimes you have companies that will say, we want a great example of our software. Can we send you a few engineers and have them use our API and build you something that we can then showcase, which is kind of a good win-win. So finally, we get into some tools talking about direct impact. These are tools built by aid groups to help newcomers at various points in their journey. Refugee Info Bus. I love this project. It is so cool. It's a mobile Wi-Fi and charging station, and they also provide information and legal advice. What they did is they took a van, they hooked up a whole bunch of battery packs, like just car batteries in sequence to each other, and put a giant antenna, and they can drive into the woods in Calais, France, get mobile data from that antenna, and then have a Wi-Fi repeater around there. And then people who are living in the woods in little communities out there trying to get from France to England are able to charge their phones, get on the Wi-Fi for a little bit, and during that time have conversations with the volunteers about the asylum process in France and what their options realistically are. So since 2016, they've had 91,000 Wi-Fi logins. They go out every day of the year. And this is what it looks like. It's just row after row of, chained extension cords. I think they can charge up to 80 phones at one time. I'm not sure if they've had any fires, but we're aid workers. We typically don't ask questions like that. So, and you can see here kind of a shot of the van with that tower in the back there. Thaki, so you remember Radina from earlier, who's one of the women leaders in the aid movement. She has this great project where she takes donated laptops from companies, loads them up with over 50 gigabytes of donated educational content, and sends them to informal schools in refugee camps around the world. I think they've done 600 devices since 2016 and helped provide an education to over 5,000 students. Hack Your Future is a free coding bootcamp, getting more people into our industry, which is wonderful. Since 2016, they've had 200 job placements, and I think this is really great because there's so many smart, skilled people who, for reasons outside of their control, are forced to seek asylum. And it can be very difficult going through that transition or living in a camp for years of your life and not having access to a proper education. So when you receive asylum and have refugee status in a country, these sorts of kind of job training programs are super important. And I think tech is a great option for people who might not be able to go back to school or use a degree that they've had in their home country. And you can see that they're running their program there. The last group that I want to talk about today is Alarm Phone. This group does life-saving work on an hourly basis. They're an emergency phone line for people who are crossing the Mediterranean. They send alerts to search and rescue ships in the area, both government ships and other kind of NGO search and rescue vessels. Over the 4 years they've been active, I think I looked at their 2018 yearly report, so it's more now, but they have responded to 2,400 emergency cases with multiple calls in each case as they track the vessel that's in distress. They've helped over 40,000 people reach land or a search and rescue ship safely. I'm not going to show any photos of stuff on the Mediterranean, but you can check out their website if you want to find out a bit more what they do. So we're getting in the last 5 minutes. I apologize for going a little bit over. I hope you can bear with me while I wrap this up. But I just wanted to get into ethics in technology. Tech is a fairly neutral thing, not all the time, but fairly neutral. The question is, are you? So let's play a game. I was going to have everyone stand up and move around for this, but I think in this case we can do hands since we're running out of time. Who has a phone in their pocket right now? It's kind of what I expected at a tech conference. So this half of the room, because you had a phone in your pocket, you were just caught at the border by agents who are using your GPS and cell tower triangulation to find out where you are and pushed back illegally. This half of the room, you have a phone, you made it safely and are able to call your friends and family and tell them that you're okay. It kind of gets into this concept of duality, where technology can be used to help people or to harm them. And we have some more examples. GPS helps enable these illegal pushbacks, but as we saw with Alarm Phone, it saves lives in the Mediterranean. The internet, we talk about this a lot in programmer circles. So much access to so much amazing info, but you also give up info with every website you visit, and some of that can be potentially dangerous. Maps are a great example. They let you find things, but they also let you find things. Not everything wants to be found. And drones is kind of a more extreme example, used in border monitoring or just for fun, flying them around the park. They also drop bombs. So in all of these cases, it's the same kind of technology used for different purposes. A couple of specific examples. Google helped us. I went to a collection warehouse that did not want to be found on Google Maps for security reasons. They had some problems with break-ins, and at this point in time, there was lots of anti-refugee aid worker sentiment coming out of some pretty far-right groups. So I called up a friend at Google, said, hey, is there any way you can just, don't have to delete the address or put a black hole on it, but can you just take off the business listing, for this aid group's warehouse? And they did. Facebook didn't. Recently, they deleted a page of a long-standing and fairly large and important grassroots NGO. That group then made a new page and continued to communicate with donors, volunteers, and other aid groups, which also got deleted. We found out that someone has been maliciously reporting their posts as spam, and Facebook's automatic spam filtering algorithm just removed the page. They appealed that. No human responded. I don't even think anyone looked at it. And then 48 hours, the page is gone. So if you don't want your company to be up on my slides the next time I get this talk, just really try to think through these systems, these automations. It makes all of our lives easier, but depending on how it's used or abused, it can end up in cases like these. If you know anyone who works at Facebook, or if you work at Facebook, I would love to talk to them to sort this out. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So you have a lot of power. Act like it. Don't let managers bully you into doing the wrong thing in order to save costs or cut corners. Internal advocacy works. We've seen a lot of tech companies respond when they make an ethically questionable judgment to employees saying, no, this isn't right and we won't stand for it. I think there's been a lot of internal change at Uber. I know there's lots of other cases like that. Even Facebook is responding to public pressure, how developers are using its accounts and stuff. And when you go look for your next job, consider the ethics of that work and the impact that you can have. I would be very surprised if anyone in this room kind of drops out of work and like goes and does nonprofit stuff full time. But if you can align what you do with helping others, I think that's even better. So salary and everything else being equal, choose the job that lets you do good in the world. And if you want to get involved in the aid movement, there's some different ways to do that. You can always donate some money. Language cafes in your local town, great fun. Like just a good way to meet other people, have a conversation. You can also donate old clothes. If anyone has some extra tech hoodies or t-shirts, I can definitely put them to good use. And looking at, for all these projects listed, doing some code reviews or contributing to the open source that we build on. It's all really good stuff. Medium, you can donate more dollars, maybe do a group fundraiser or something, have a little dinner party. You can tap into local support networks, people who are already organizing in your community, and you can help them out. You can volunteer at the local collection warehouse, sorting clothes and shipping them, and you can contribute code to these projects. Finally, hard, you can donate more dollars. Get your employers involved. It's really hard from our perspective to find out about sort of employer-sponsored programs to be a part of. I've spent hours and hours Googling. So I know that everyone that I've been talking about today would love it if there's like a directory of that, or if you reached out to them and just gave them a heads up if it's a good fit. Local housing projects, if you have an extra room, maybe you have an Airbnb, but want to put that to better use. People who come to countries need houses, and there's lots of ways to help there. You can go volunteer with groups in the field. Take a week of your vacation or two, take some time off before that next job, get out, move around, and of course you can start your own project like I did. So that's my talk. Thank you very much, and I'd love to talk to you.